ancestors worked hard, and there wasn't much to spare. So if they wanted new clothes, they made them. It was just that simple. And their handwork often became heirlooms, handed down from generation to generation. Maybe life is easier today, and maybe we are in a bigger hurry, but we can still take time to create heirlooms, and that is time worth spending.
Heirlooms by Design with Sharon LoMonaco is sponsored by Capital Imports, your passport for fine lace, embroideries, and fabrics, by OmniGrid, the most accurate and versatile products for the quilter, artist, and craftsperson, and by Quilts Plus, your authorized Bernina dealer. Now, here's Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon LoMonaco. Thanks for joining me on Heirlooms by Design. Today I'd like to introduce you to Lynn Graves. I'm glad you could be with us today, Lynn.
Well, thank you, Sharon. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm just delighted to have you here. Lynn is the creator of Littlefoot, Bigfoot, and much more. And as you can see, we are just surrounded by exquisite quilts. Lynn, please tell us about your quilts and your unique quilting technique.
Well, I'm basically what I consider a novice quilter, just 7 or 8 years now. And, I'm one of the new guys on the block. And I enjoy it, and I'm obsessed with and possessed by quilting. It has really taken over my
It'll do
entire
that.
life. Just absolutely taken it over. And going into business, which evolved, has been even more consuming. And I don't get nearly the time to quilt.
I'm sure. Well, tell us about some of these beautiful designs that you have here.
Well, thank you. I'd like to. This happens to be called the lover's chain. The basic pattern is a very old pattern. It's called the endless chain. And what we've done is update it. All the things that you see on this particular wall are the exact same pattern. It's color manipulation. It's just fabric placement. This one looks very much like a baby's block. In the quilting pattern.
Right.
And of course we have the wonderful butterfly called Mariposa. I call the Mariposa, and a star, and all of these, and it's all the same pattern. Here we have this wonderful smaller piece that looks very oriental, and with the colors this way, when you turn it around on the other side, it looks completely
Totally different, just by
changing where the black is and the red is. This one has no centers, and this one does.
That's great. And I'll bet those centers really help with doing some piecing and matching.
Yes, they do. Actually, what's so fun about the process that we use is we have a lot of margin for error, and we don't have to be perfect, and yet our outcome, our finished product, looks wonderful. The circles can cover a multitude of sins.
Yes. Tell us about these little critters we have on the wall over here. These are just adorable.
Yeah, those are two of my favorite. This is the pineapple block, the basic pineapple block, just as we see the pineapple draped across here. And what we've done, I sew on a foundation sheet of paper that is already pre-printed. This is Fred, and that's a little pin I designed. I designed the pin first, and then I did
Then you did Fred.
Then I did Fred. And this is Baby, and she has her own pin as well. And I put it in the center of 4 pineapple blocks. And this is one of the things that we make the paper work for us. This is a very difficult design to do because the blocks have a tendency to not be square. And I have made the paper work for me in writing on the paper and then appliqued so that I had the whites all here and then have a frame for my center applique. And so anyway, that's Fred and Baby.
Well, these are the papers that Lynn is referring to. These are her foundation sheets. And in a few moments, we're going to go over to the machine and see just how they work.
Heirlooms by Design will return in a moment.
We're going to begin to sew a pineapple block. Lynn, will you tell us why we sew on paper?
Because it's easy and because it's accurate. And I have a good time with it. It's a lot of fun.
That's great. And tell me how this technique originated.
Well, it's certainly not something that I did. Our grandmothers used this, our foremothers, if you will. And they would take newspapers, they would take paper sacks, whatever they happened to have, use the scraps from their clothing, be it very tiny little strips from the edge of their clothing. And they would sew it on the paper, and they would make a stitch and sew a seam, turn it over, add another piece, and they would fill up this whole paper. Now from that they could cut stars and have the string stars. There's some wonderful old star quilts, the old string star quilts. And they would maybe just cut blocks out of it and make simple patch quilts. These were called utility quilts. They slept under them, and they were not fancy. They were the old string quilts. So it's not a new process at all. What I've done is made it easy. I've pre-printed the lines on there.
That's good. Tell us what our machine setup is for this. What size needle and what kind of stitch length are we going to be using?
When you sew on paper, it is absolutely essential that you use a very, very tiny stitch length. On my sewing machine, I use a 1.5 on my Bernina. On the featherweight, my Singer featherweight, I use about 20 stitches to the inch. So you want a very tiny stitch. The reason for that is it perforates the paper and for easy paper removal. That's why we do it.
Well, I'm going to be concerned then about if we have to rip out. So you're going to show us a way to unsew easily.
I got a technique for you to unsew.
Let's get started. How do we position the first piece down?
Well, on the paper, do we want to take a look at the paper? On the paper, as you can see, the lines are already printed on here, and it tells you where to put the center, where to put everything as you go along. So I have a piece of fabric already cut, and I cut it a scant amount for the center. This pineapple that we're doing happens to be a 2.5 inch. And there's a new product on the market that I call Lick and Stick, and it's really very inexpensive. I don't like to use pins except when absolutely necessary. So this is what we do.
So that's Lick and Stick.
That's Lick and Stick. Very inexpensive and always at hand, unless you talk a lot. Absolutely. Then I take my first strip of fabric. Now my strips for this particular pattern are cut 1.5 inches wide. I cut from selvage to selvage. I don't have to cut templates. I don't have to cut strips that are each exact length.
That's great.
And it's easy. Now then, I am of course using Littlefoot on here. The lines are our guidelines. We use them to line our presser foot right next to the line. And then we sew again with this very tiny, tiny stitch length. Let me just sew one here. I go all the way down. Now I'm using Littlefoot on here, obviously. It's my product, so that's what I use. It is not mandatory to sew on the foundation sheets. However, it makes life a lot easier because of the marks on it. Now then, I have sewn the first seam. I'm going to, in this case right now, I will just scissor press it back. I'm going to take the scissors and do this. I use a 7-inch ginger. The 7-inch ginger fits my hand, it's light, and it's wonderful. It's just the quilter's pair of scissors. I will flip the fabric right over the scissor blade. I line the scissor blade up right against the blue line. Let me do this side first. Might be able to see it a little bit better. See, I have opened it up, palm down, point towards the seam that I've just sewn, and go snip.
Oh, that's easy.
Oh, it's a piece of cake. It's just wonderful. And then snip like that. So now I have my first piece on.
Oh, look at that. And so that's how you determine your length.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
great. That's great.
Then I press everything because I get a much better crease with it, and I'm less likely to get a tuck when I come around in the other ones.
Oh, well, then what's our next step? We're going to go to the other side of this, or what?
Yes, we're going to just go right over here. You see I have another one here.
Oh,
Through
good.
the magic of wonderful people, we have another one right here. We've done the white ones. We've done a couple of those. I'm going to sew the next white one on, and then we'll do another color.
Well, now, how do you know where to begin?
Because everything is numbered. And also with Littlefoot happens to has marks on it, red marks, that are 1/4 inch in front of and behind the center needle position. It also has little 1/8 inch marks in between. It just so happens on the paper, the way this angle is, that when you're going to start, you're going to line up the very back notch of Littlefoot, actually the front notch right here. The front notch right here, it's going to sink your needle exactly where we're going to go. We're going to sew all the way to the back notch. That's this notch right here when it crosses this diagonal line. Let me show you right quick like, and I think you'll be able to see a little bit better what I'm talking about. So we're going to put this piece on. I'm going to put it right at the beginning of this notch where the line crosses, right
I see.
here.
Okay.
All right.
Your red line on Littlefoot.
Yes,
Okay.
this very front one. I'm going to sew all the way up. I'm going to sew to the very back notch when it crosses this line.
Marvelous.
And then you can see I have some turquoise thread in here so that you can see what I'm doing. Once again, bring this back, scissor press at the time, snip, and then once again, snip right here. This palm down is very important, and once you get used to it, it's very, very easy.
Now, what do we do if we make a mistake?
Oh, easy, easy,
With these
easy.
tiny stitches. Now, I know we can't get a seam ripper under them.
No, 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 no. That's very hard. Let me show you on one. What I would like to do is sew a seam part way.
Okay.
And we'll do one that's a little bit longer. As you can see, this is a block that is already out quite a ways.
And it really is nice and flat and square. That's wonderful.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, that's the purpose of the paper, is to make it easy and accurate. I mean, the accuracy is the key. A pineapple can be very, very, have a tendency to absolutely distort.
Sure can.
All right, once again, I'm just going to start. I'm using my very tiny stitch. I'm going to sew down a ways, and then I'm going to go, oh my goodness, I have, in this case, I didn't put the wrong one on and should have, but if I put a white one on here, and it was wrong, then I have to take it off. So again, you can see this very, very tiny stitch. So let me get my rotary cutter. I like this kind. Very carefully use these, very, very carefully, because these are very, very sharp. What I do is going to flip this back, take my rotary cutter, and because of these little tiny stitches, you can just right out.
Oh, that's amazing.
See how easy that
I
is?
never thought of using the rotary cutter to unsew.
Just use it carefully.
That's great. And so now we would just take out the thread that's there and start again.
Absolutely.
Within the correct color
Right.
or correct whatever the mistake was. That's
And
great.
there's a little tip, that little trick that you can use that will work on occasion.
Oh, that purple thing.
We can take that purple thing, and if you just go right under here and slip it like that, that pretty much pulls
Oh, that's
your-
good.
Isn't that a nice little tip? And then
Oh,
this
yeah.
comes right off. And you can either take a piece of tape and do that, or just pull it.
Well, you notice that I keep my purple thing handy in my drawer.
Absolutely, we need that purple thing. Okay, so now then, we have gone through the first one. Remember, we put the first strip on and we sewed one strip. Then the other sides go around, and the paper is numbered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It tells you so you don't get lost. Another thing that's very important, Sharon, when we're using paper is make the paper work for you. If you want it colored here, you want this one red or blue or yellow or green, take your pencil right on the paper.
That's right.
So you don't get
Absolutely.
lost.
And now when we come back from break, we're going to see how to square up this square once we're finished.
We'll return in a moment.
We're going to take a look at the lover's chain now. I can't believe that this circular pattern can be as easy as the pineapple.
It definitely is. It is done in half hexes.
Well, how do
Half
we
hexes.
begin this?
Well, we have the pattern, as you can see, and it is a half hex. We are going to take our first strip and we are going to put it down right side up, and we are going to cover this wedge part right here. The next piece of fabric goes on right here. We want to be sure that we see our blue line.
Right.
Now the second fabric that goes on only needs to go to the top right here.
Okay.
Because when we flip it, it's going to be fine.
Sure.
All right. We'll continue to pretend that we have just sewn this seam.
Okay, good.
All right. Now then, we're going to the next piece that goes on, and here it's a different color, but magic of television, what can I say? Now then, this piece that goes on to cover this wedge
Yes.
must come above the lines here, so that when we sew it down, it's going to flip and cover, this point.
Okay.
And when we trim that, we want to make sure we have our dotted lines showing. I'll tell you about that in just a moment.
Okay, good.
Once we have gone all the way around our block, then it's going to look like this. I will come along and I will do a little tack stitch. Remember how I did the tack stitch on the pineapple? To hold it down so that when we sew 2 blocks together, these don't move. So we would do that. Now, the dotted lines that I told you about are our extended cutting lines. Those are very important because this is a hexagonal block. Let's make it easy. Let's take our OmniGrid ruler. We're going to line our ruler up right along these lines. Now, you know the little tip about putting your little finger on the outside of the ruler?
This.
All right, you want to put your finger right on the outside. The purpose for that is to anchor your ruler so it's not going to slip.
Sure, they like to get airborne sometimes.
Absolutely. All right, now then, I'm going to cut. I do not wish to cut all the way to the edge of the paper. I'm not going to just take it
And
off.
why is that?
Because I want to see this little dotted line and this little dotted line as I come around. It's my guideline.
For your next cut, then.
Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful, great.
Now I'm going to cut up to, but not through, this extended
Okay.
cutting line. You see here? See how I have this like this?
So it's still just going to hang on there.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to turn this right here. Again, because now I have these dotted lines, I did not cut it off, and they're going to go up here. I will cut from here to here and continue around in this same manner, lining up. If you accidentally cut it off, it's all right, because all you have to do is turn this back a little bit so you can see your line.
Oh, I see.
Can you see how
sure.
we've done that? In case this accidentally cut off.
All right, okay.
So when we get through, once again, we're going to come out and we're going to have a lopsided half hex.
All right, and then what do we do?
We take
Another
another
one.
one and we sew them together.
Okay.
Line them up, and you'll see that it just lines up right along there. So a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. While it's still in that position, take your scissors and give a little cut up to the seam line. When you open it and press it, you want to press left side down, right side up. That's why we've cut this little piece right here.
Right, and
So
this is
that-
going to keep all of our seam allowances going in the same direction.
Every time we connect this to something, it's going to, the seams will butt and not stack.
That's fantastic. Now, how are we going to sew these together? Surely, I mean, I'm sure that you have an easy way to sew these together. I can't imagine what it is, but
I have an easy way to sew it together,
Okay.
and I have tried just about every way there is, from strips and blocks and groups and 3Zs and 4Zs. What I like to do, of course, obviously, you're going to sew 2 together first. You're going to leave this 1/4 inch open here. That's very important, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So
now that little area where you're going to begin, we have marked that.
Yes.
That's marked on our paper pattern. Is that
Absolutely.
correct?
There is a little pinpoint right here, and all you have to do before you start is take a straight pin, poke it through the hole right there. That gives you a stop point,
That's wonderful.
and just
That's
back stitch
great.
at that. So we sew that. Now then we
Now,
take-
we do backstitch each of these
I
at
do
the
back
beginning and the
stitch
end.
these
Yes, okay.
because we are dealing with a stress point here.
Right, that's right.
All right. So I'm going to take the next one when I've decided on my design where it goes. And I find doing these one at a time, and I'll show you something fun with this. I'm going to do these like this and see how my seams are going to stack and not butt. I like to sew from this point out
Okay,
from
sure.
the seam that I've already sewn. That way if there's a pucker or anything,
It'll sew out.
now I will start at the stopping point of my previous stitching. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch, and this is necessary. We're just going to zip it right along here. I'm going to sew up to that point, back stitch.
When we come back, we're going to see how to sew the other side of this.
We'll be back with more Heirlooms by Design.
Now that we have our first 2 seams done, how are we going to get into that 3rd seam?
Very, very easily. I call this an accordion fold. And I take the block, I turn it right in, I put it down, I do this. I mean, it's that simple.
Well, that's
absolutely that simple.
It certainly is nice and neat. It just falls right under there.
It does, it does. Let me get all the way to the end so you can see what it looks like.
that, how flat it lays. That's amazing. Now, Lynn, we have these blocks that we put together. Are we going to take the paper off of this or what?
Absolutely. We want to leave the paper on until our entire project is completed. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it stabilizes and keeps our quilt from stretching out.
Because we probably have a lot of bias edges on here.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Because that's one of the nice things about paper is that if you want to isolate something fun out of a piece of fabric, then you can, and it doesn't matter if it's on the bias because the paper is going to stabilize
That's
everything.
great.
So we leave it on until we're through. And then you may think taking the paper off is difficult. It's really quite easy. And you notice earlier in the program we said we must use a very tiny stitch length.
Oh, look at this. It
You
just
see.
pulls right off.
Now, what I do is I take it and I very gently crumple it between my fingers and then it
Oh, for heaven's
comes
sake.
right off.
This looks like helper work. You could get your children or your grandchildren.
This is very definitely a honeydew project. You see.
Yes.
Honey, would you help me do this, you see? Because, I spend too much time sewing and all of that, so now would you help me do this and we can spend some quality time together.
Quality time picking paper.
Right. It makes a mess, but the nice thing about it is I have a very square block when I'm through, and it fits together.
And that's so
with
important.
the next block.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, do you have a book or any other kind of instructions on this?
Actually, we are in the process, I'm in the process of writing a book. It's going to be, the first one is going to be Endless Possibilities, and it's going to be on the lover's chain.
Oh, that's
because
great.
as you can see,
The possibilities are endless.
absolutely, absolutely. And so
Right.
that is in the works. I don't know, when it will be published, but we hope soon.
One of the things I'd like to show you, in your packet of foundation sheets, you also get a worksheet to work out your designs and to actually to discover the designs that are hidden within these design sheets. And then you just get to play like kindergarten and first grade with your colors again and just have lots of fun coloring up different designs.
This
is
one,
wonderful.
this one happens to be this particular quilt right here, and it's Butterflies in My Garden.
Oh, that's wonderful. Those flowers are gorgeous. I have a beautiful quilt in my lap, and it feels very different than all of these other quilts. It drapes very differently. Can you tell us about this quilt? This is really special.
This is heaven. This is one's dream quilt. This is all silk. It has silk batting, silk noil, silk dress scraps cutaways, and it is quilted with silk thread. And as you can see, it is absolutely wonderful. And this is, again, the pineapple block.
That's wonderful. The number of things that you can do with one block with
It
just
is.
this color manipulation is fabulous.
And we talked about earlier in the program the different sizes of our blocks. This is a 4.5-inch pineapple block. This particular quilt was made and quilted by Bonnie Jean Rosenbaum.
And this is hand quilted, and
Yes.
it's absolutely lovely.
Just drapes so nicely.
Yes, it's beautiful. Well, Lynn, I've really enjoyed having you with us today. And I have loved learning about these foundation sheets. They go together so quickly and easily. You can really get your block together accurately, quickly, and using the foundation sheet and the little foot, it's just no problem at all.
Again,
It's just
thank
wonderful.
you for having me. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
I'll be looking forward to seeing you again on our next series, and I'm sure you'll have some more wonderful quilts and wonderful techniques to show us.
We have some zingers for you.
I'll bet you do. In the coming weeks, we have many more delightful guests and some new products. There will be many exciting techniques to show you. They will range from quilting to French machine sewing, machine embroidery to lace making, and all of them will be heirlooms by design.
Heirlooms by Design has been brought to you by Capital Imports, by Omnigrid, and by Quilts Plus. If you'd like more information on the supplies and techniques used in today's show, then drop us a note to Quilts Plus, 1211 Noble Street, Anniston, Alabama 36201. That's Quilts Plus, 1211 Noble Street, Anniston, Alabama 36201. Sharon will be back with more Heirlooms by Design next week.